The federal government today released the final version of proposed regulations to protect airline passengers. It requires airlines to compensate travelers for lost baggage, overbooked flights, and delayed or canceled flights. Some of the new rules will begin to take effect in July. Transport Minister Marc Garneau joins us from Pearson Airport in Toronto. Minister, we've seen draft versions of these rules before. What does the finalized version that you've released today do for air passengers?
Well, I think it finally tells people that who take airplanes that we have the regulations, they're in place. Most of them will come into effect on the 15th of July. Some of the more complex ones will come into effect on the 15th of December, but I think this is good news for air passengers. We've had a lot of consultation. We think that we have come up with some very good regulations that show passengers that they have rights when they buy a ticket.
One of those regulations involving delays. The penalties don't kick in, though, as I understand it, until passengers have been sitting on the tarmac for 3 hours or longer. That can be, as you know, a very long time in an aircraft. Why not make that window shorter?
So we looked at this very carefully. If you look at the United States, they have a 3-hour limit. That's for domestic flights. For international flights, it's actually 4 hours. And the Europeans don't even have a maximum time. So we looked at this very carefully. We think 3 hours is a reasonable delay, but what we've introduced here are standards of treatment for people who are facing a tarmac delay. They have to be provided with regular status updates, food and water, the ability to communicate, use of the bathroom, those kinds of things, so that we can minimize the discomfort when there is a tarmac delay, and they do happen occasionally.
Right, and you're laying out a regime of fines or penalties for airlines, but is the onus on getting compensation going to be on the passengers themselves, or will the airlines, when in a case of a long delay, automatically compensate passengers?
In most cases, the airlines and the passengers will be the two interacting. If something cannot be solved at the satisfaction of one of the two parties, you can go to the Canadian Transportation Agency. But we believe that most of the compensations, that the accommodations that will be required will be done between the airline and the passenger. In the case of overbooking, it has to be done within 48 hours, and overbooking has some fairly heavy compensation, as you probably know.
Right. And I understand on the issue of delays that that 3-hour window could be exceeded if there's safety considerations involved. How are you going to police this so you know that airlines are being straight with their passengers about the real reason for a delay?
So every time an airline has to have a delay for whatever reason, it has to file the reason why. And Transport Canada sees that information. So we know why there will be a delay in every case. So there's no way that the airlines are going to be able to, if you like, hide the reason why there is a delay. We will know that very carefully, very clearly, and we will enforce any compensation that comes out of that if it was within the airline's control.
And presumably that compensation is going to cost the airline some money, at least initially. How do you know this isn't going to just be passed on to passengers in the form of higher ticket prices?
Well, we think that we've come up with something that is fair to both the airlines and to the passengers, and we think that it's not going to result in any increases in fares. Airlines also know that they have to try to remain as competitive as possible, so it is within their control to try to avoid the kinds of situations that result in them having to give compensation. We think that we've come up with something that is fair, but also is going to put the onus on airlines to recognize that they will have to compensate when a delay or a cancellation or an overbooking situation occurs that was within their control, because otherwise it wouldn't be fair to the passengers. Imagine, a family with 2 kids and they've saved up all year and their trip to a place is delayed or canceled, and it was within the control of the airline. They deserve to be compensated.
Yeah, I mean, it's not always the airline's fault. Sometimes the problem with delays rests with the airport, not having gates available or ground crew available. Will there be sanctions for them too?
Yeah, so no, not for the airports, but airports can be responsible in some cases for delays. For example, if there's a terrorist event or if there's a go slow in terms of working or a union strike, that is not the fault of the airline, just like weather or an air traffic control problem. Those are things beyond the airline's control, and we clearly define the situations that are within the airline's control and those that are not within their control. And if there's any contestation, then the Canadian Transportation Agency will rule on whether or not it was within their control or not within their control.
Just while I've got you on a quick update on the Boeing MAX 8, do you have an estimate now on when do you think those aircraft will be back in the air?
When they're safe to fly. That's the answer. We're not giving ourselves a schedule. We have a number of stages to go through, not only the certifier, the Americans, the FAA, but also here in Canada. We want to make sure that when airplanes, MAX 8s, fly in and out of Canada or across Canada, that they are completely safe.
All right, Marc Garneau, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.